Hey y'all, I'm so glad that you're back, and I'm here today, yes, with another story about another witch. And this one is probably one you guys have never heard of before, but that's okay, because I'm going to tell you all about her. She was actually the first recorded American witch, and this was about 60 years before the Salem witch trials. And so Thomas Jefferson was actually the one that found these papers in an old courthouse and found these statements from this lady about her trial and about what happened, what went down, and everything. This is a very gentle trial, so I'm not going to put like a discretion or anything out there, because I know some of the ones I get into are kind of dark. She's actually a very spiritual midwife, and it kind of comes back to bite her, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and get the party started, and then I'll tell you guys who we're talking about. So today we are talking about Joan Wright, okay? And she was the first recorded American witch on record before the Salem witch trials, okay? Now, she wasn't born in America. She ends up migrating to America. She's born in England. And before she comes over to America, she has a job over in England, right? And this job is she was a milkmaid. And now this is back in we're talking about in the 1600s, okay? This is back in like where you had to do everything by hand and to turn butter and things like that, okay, was incredibly hard to do. You had to do it, you couldn't do it on like hot days. You had to do it in cool places so that it wouldn't spoil and the curds wouldn't do all this crazy stuff. And so she was in charge of the butter churn. She made butter, okay? Now, keep that in mind, because you know, if you don't know what a butter churn is, you're welcome to Google it. But it's like a big wooden, what's the word? Bowl, bucket, huge wooden bucket. And it's got a cover over it, and in the middle is a very large stick, and you have to keep it moving and moving and moving to create the butter. That's you stirring up the fat, the milk, and all this other kind of stuff. Well, one of these days, there's an old saying back in England that if somebody comes and knocks on your door and, asks for food or a handout or some, or they just ask you for something. And if you don't give them what they want, they could put a curse on you, basically. So if they didn't leave your house happy, and of course this is for women, I'm not talking about men. It's about women. So she was a butter churner back in England, in Hull, which is where she was from. And this was during a time that in Europe that witch hunting was kind of prevalent. Okay, we're talking about the 1600s now. This is when King James has written his book about demonology and basically a DIY on how to find and be a witch hunter, basically. And so she starts looking for more freedoms. But before she goes, two things happen to her, okay? So because of this coming and going to the house of strangers, okay, and if they're not happy when they leave, they're going to curse you, or if they are happy when they leave, then you'll be just fine, right? Well, the lady that our chick worked for was very, 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 very superstitious, okay, like so super superstitious. And so she had a feeling that this girl had taken something from her the last time that evidently they had a visitor, and this lady did not like the visitor, thought she had done something to her. And so she employs Joan. She asked Joan to stop churning. It's a hot day. Stop your churning. I want you to ram that pole down as hard as you can and then clap 2 or 3 times over the top of it or something like that. and then hold on to the churn. Now, what this woman was doing was setting up counter magic. So this is kind of one of, I mean, I'm sure it's not the first time it's used, but this was a story that she ends up carrying on with her when she gets to America and is very, very important. Okay. So, lady shows up, right? And she's like, okay, what do you want me to do? You know? And so you got Joan in there with her hand on the thing, and she's just like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing here? She's just standing there. And her boss comes in and brings in this supposed witch that had needed to be, you know, taught a lesson. And yeah, the girl just falls down to the floor, evidently, after touching this butter churn. She falls to the floor. She starts asking and weeping for forgiveness and like all these other fun things. So this superstitious person that she works for thinks after a while, this was after the churning incident, she thinks that she is cursed. Okay. And so this was what happens. Next time a lady is to come over, and this is what Joan is told to do. Okay. She's told to do these things by her employer. Tells her the next time somebody comes by, she needs to take an iron, like a horseshoe iron, a horseshoe that's made out of iron. Okay. She needs to wait until somebody comes by that is trying to get something from her employer or whatever. When the chick shows up, she throws the horseshoe into an oven, okay, until it gets really, 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 really hot, like red hot, like you're going to brand something. And then she drops it in a bucket of her employer's urine. Now, as the horseshoe sizzles in the liquid, you know, cooling, it makes the witch convulse and do all these crazy things, and then it's supposed to make her employer feel better as it cools down, which it did. All these things worked. The first time with the butter churn, she saw the girl, you know, fall to her knees and ask for forgiveness for her wickedness or whatnot. Now, you know, and now we've got another time. Well, she thought that her employer thought that she was bewitched, but she wasn't. Of course she wasn't. She was just very paranoid. She was a very paranoid woman. Her employer in England, by the way. We're not in America yet. Nope. So she says, as long as the horseshoe is hot, the witch was sick at heart. That is what her employer said, word for word. So she felt a whole lot better after that iron cooled down. So our Joan embarks on a trip to America in 1610. That's the date they think. Now, she can't afford her ticket, so she has to have somebody else buy it for her, which is kind of like a normal thing back then. And when you showed up to America, you were promised 50 acres. And so she figured this would be a really good place to go to escape, you know, religious persecution, because she was a fortune teller and a midwife. But she was a very spiritual very spiritual. She did it on a spiritual level, you know. Everything she did was on a spiritual level. She wasn't ever trying to hurt anybody or harm anybody. Only mistake she makes is when she gets to Virginia and she starts meeting people, and she actually gets married to a guy named Robert Wright. That's where she got her last name. I couldn't find out what her birth name was. And they have 2 kids, you know, so she feels like she's fulfilled her life, right? She's fulfilled exactly what has been asked of her. She's come over on the boat. She's gotten her land. She's gotten married. She's got her 2 kids. So she's done everything that she was supposed to do, right? And so she's like, okay, I'm going to be a midwife. I'm going to start doing, things for me again, basically. She liked being a midwife because she was very spiritual when she did it. And she liked telling fortunes as well, because that was something that she was kind of brought up in, you know. It was something that she was taught. And it's very interesting that the guy that she married had just gotten to Virginia like 2 years before her. And it was actually a really good dude that she married because he had been there for 3 years. And the other one was they had to pay their own way. And so technically, our Joan is not one of the ones that actually paid her own way to America. Somebody else paid for her. We don't know who. And so, anyway, she's not one of these like sacred planters or whatever that they call her husband. But anyway, her husband's a good dude. He's a sawyer. He clears land, and that's the kind of people they need because this is Virginia, Jamestown, guys. First settlement, you know what I mean? Well, one of the first. And so they really had a hard time. The first, actually, and I'm gonna drop a little Indian history here, a little Native history. So back then, old John Smith comes through, right? And then that year they share food and they feast together and all these other things like everybody says. Well, after that, the next year, the natives of the land start finding the Europeans are coming and stealing their food, stealing their stuff, because the colonists didn't know how to plant where they were living, didn't know what kind of plants they were having in their region. They didn't know anything about America. They just told people, hey, get on a boat and come over here and we'll give you 50 acres of land that's not even ours, but we'll give it to you, And so that was how they got people to come to America. And it wasn't just, and of course, this is when slavery started kicking in. This is when the Indian wars start kicking in and things like that because the natives get upset. It's one thing that they had tried to teach these people how to live off the land, and they did not listen. And this kind of leans into the story, don't worry, because of what happens to Joan. All right? She's only wanted to try to help people. That's all she's ever wanted to do. But she makes the mistake, like I said earlier, I don't think I said this earlier, of telling the other women in her little group or whatever these stories that she witnessed back in Hull in England about the butter churn, about the girl going down on the ground and asking for forgiveness and all this stuff. She tells them all about that, and they're like, oh, wow, counter magic. That actually sounds pretty cool, right? Now, her and her husband had started working for someone, and they ended up moving to Elizabethtown, which was like a little tiny place outside of Jamestown. It was all kind of put there together. You know what I mean? Wow, that's pretty. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to admire that for a second. That's really fucking pretty. Anyway, so they moved to Elizabeth City, and they move along with the two guys that plant vines because it's a vineyard, and then they work. They stay with them. Joan, by this time, she's still working as a midwife and a fortune teller. Now, problems start to arise because a man had a wife, okay, and he was in search of a midwife. Well, obviously, his first choice was Joan, okay? But because of what the women had heard about these stories that Joan told about what things that happened in England, she was like, no, we can't have her at our house. No, that would just not be a good thing for us. So let's just not do that. And so instead of this man not going and having, any kind of set whatsoever, he doesn't even go and tell her that she doesn't have the job. Okay. This man's name is Giles. And he's kind of one that sparks this whole entire thing for poor old Joan. Because, after the day after the baby's born, she was pissed. Because she didn't know, nobody told her she was not the midwife. She thought she was hired. Okay, the issue here, guys. She thought that she was hired. And so when she heard that the baby was born, she was very, very upset. So what does she do? She goes to their house. Okay? Just like back in England, when somebody shows up at your house and they ask for something, if they aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they get mad. So when she goes there and she finds out about this, she gets really, really angry, which I really don't blame her whatsoever. And because at least he could have like been a man and been like, hey, I'm not hiring you. I'm sorry. My wife's not comfortable with it, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that Joan would have been like, okay, I understand if she wants to go with somebody else or whatnot. So anyway, she's pissed when she leaves the house. Now this sparks things out of all the moms, inside of all the women, saying, remember the story she told us? And she just left his farm so mad. Like she was boiling. She was so mad. And so, anyway, she gets in trouble for doing that because she gets really, really pissed. Now, this Giles guy actually had beef with her before the whole entire midwife thing happened. He had beef with Joan. Yes, he did. And what beef was that? Well, evidently this man would go hunting. Okay? He would go hunting. Normal. Totally normal, right? Well, it had been impossible for him to kill or hurt an animal because of Joan. He thinks that she has put some kind of spirit energy or something on him to where he can't shoot game now for the rest of the colony. He hasn't been able to shoot he can't shoot straight, basically, okay? He's upset. He's thinking that she's setting up these deer to twitch at the right moment, so that they miss, instead of just going and practicing yourself. Have you ever thought about that? Just go practice. Set up some bottles in your backyard and go to town practicing, buddy. Because it sounds like you weren't really good at hunting. And this is when it all happens. The scapegoat. She becomes the scapegoat. Yes, she does. Of course she does. Everything that has ever happened to these people, she is going to blame somebody for that. I mean, they are going to always blame somebody else for that. They're never going to blame themselves, which is so weird. But it is what it is, and that's why we are here today. So, anyways, poor old Joan. She's so mad about the midwife thing, and then before that, she had to deal with this man saying that he can't shoot a gun because of her, basically. And then we got another guy who backs up his story and is like, "Oh yeah, that's true." His name was Thomas, and Thomas Johns confirmed what he said. Now there was a sergeant, of course, because Giles was a lieutenant, right? There's a sergeant, and his name is Sergeant Reynold Booth. And he would hunt, but he couldn't hit anything either. And it was actually the sergeant's job to get food for the colony. So he wasn't able to shoot anything. And they're trying to blame her. Make it make sense. It's not like she's out there scaring the crap out of the deer whenever they come in the woods, so that they can't shoot them. She's not doing any of that. They're just using this as an excuse for their own failings. Okay? I'm just saying. Everybody started pointing the finger. Here we go. You're a witch. Yep. We can't get any meat. There were droughts. There was the torrential downpours that washed out people's crops. And then there was the midwife situation. Now, what happened with the midwife situation, you ask? She left the house angry, remember? Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't too long after that the one that had the kid, she fell ill. Yeah, she sure did. She recovered, but then her husband fell ill. And it didn't say if he recovered, but he probably did. But the saddest part about this is that the baby got sick. And this was something that happened on the regular back then. The fact that Joan and her husband and 2 kids had made it this far in Virginia during this time was like phenomenal. So they were kind of put on a pedestal because they were like, hey, we've been here for a long time. We've been here since it like first opened. And so they kind of rode that wave out. You know what I mean? They were very, very highly regarded people. But at the same time, we got people that are saying she's the one, you know, she left their house angry, just like she said they did in England. She left their house very, very mad. So she must be very, very upset, right? So she probably did something to the family. She probably cursed the family, right? Anyways, and so not just a victim of circumstance. Maybe dude can't shoot a gun. Maybe he's out of practice. Maybe his sights are off. You know, there's a number of reasons that could happen, and none of them have to do with the witch. They just don't. I'm sorry, they just don't. Not as much as they would like to. And so anyway, he got better, but the baby did not. The baby passed away, unfortunately. And so when she left his house very angrily, everybody got really pissed. So what happens? She ends up doing fortune telling because at this point, her reputation's a bit soiled. You know what I mean? And there's not a lot of people that like that. And so she's been soiled. And so she goes to fortune telling. Yes, fortune telling. And she was actually really good at it. What she could do was predict who in the family, like between a husband and wife, who would pass first. Dark, right? Like, I just don't want to know that. I'm sorry, but I had to get that on there looking right. Anyway, she uses her job as a fortune teller, and she starts being able to tell people who's going to die first. Like, if a woman was going to pass before her husband, or if she was going to be the one that's going to end up burying her husband, type deal. You know, she could supposedly report deaths. You know, that somebody was going to pass before the other. But you know, to be honest with y'all, and me just having somebody pass in my family is very close. I could tell that my dad was going to go before my mom. And I mean, it's not like a common sense thing. I mean, it is actually, it is common sense. It really is. You can look at a relationship and you can hear things, especially back then with women all the time. And you hear things. And so her accusations really start racking up, okay? There was this one chick that had been stealing stuff from people, and this really irked Joan. So she said that she was going to make her dance naked under the moon if she didn't quit stealing stuff from people. Which I think was just her trying to just kind of be funny in a way, but not, you know what I mean? So they said that she was enchanting chickens. Yeah, enchanting chickens. To do her bidding. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. That's not why. No. She actually saw this man who had a bunch of chickens, and he had all these roosters and stuff locked up. They were all chained together. And he was supposed to give this to this girl that he said he would give her these hens. And so Joan's like, hey, she gonna be dead before you get these hens to her. Why you have them locked up like this? That was the gist of her basically, supposedly enchanting chickens. Okay. And of course we have the whole enchanting cow, or let me not say enchanting, bewitching cows. You know, cows stop giving milk. It's not cool, man. You know, they get upset about that. They don't look at the fact that maybe they need to move their cow to a different pasture, maybe find some fattier kind of type grasses or whatnot for their, you know, there's reasons why things happen. Everything in America is not like it was in England or anywhere in Europe. It was brand new, right? Mm-hmm. Anyways, off we go. She bewitched chickens and she bewitched butter churns. She liked to make people's stuff go sour, supposedly. She didn't do this. Butter churning was a very fickle bee, all right? Butter churning, you had to do so many different things, and I read about it, and I wish I could explain it to y'all, but I was definitely not a butter churner in another life, okay? I don't know how these women did it, but I bet you their freaking arms were ripped. You know what I mean? So here comes the day of her trial, all right? And her trial is September 11th of 1626. And now keep in mind, back then and during this kind of Virginia, even though King James had already made his little thing about witches and all that other stuff, it hadn't really reached America, and plus people were going there to try to get away from that. You know what I mean? That's why they were going to America to begin with, was to get away from that madness. And so they, people didn't really think of witches in Virginia this time as demonic or anything like that. That's why all these things are like petty squabbles between neighbors. That's basically what she goes to court for. Petty squabbles with neighbors. I mean, it gets more than that, but it's just because of what people are saying about her neighbors, and things like that. The stories that she told from England, that she told about England and things like that. And then she predicts several deaths, which I'm not going to lie. If you look at a couple, you can tell which one is probably going to pass before the other. As sick and macabre as that sounds, it's more of like a reading your face deal, which is a type of thing. You know, we had a witch that read faces like a few weeks ago. And so she, you know, I'm pretty sure that's how she did it. She probably just would be like, well, obviously, you know. This one chick, though, had an issue. She'd already been married before, and she had issues because her first marriage, when he died, he didn't have a living will. He didn't have a written will out. So it's kind of difficult for her to make sure that she was financially secure, because this is also still something in the back of a lot of women's heads, right? They want to be financially secure, especially after their husbands pass away. And so she was really wanting to know, like, if she needed, what she needed to do to make sure she was going to be secure. But by this time, Joan was starting to get the, you know, the feels. She's like, I think people are really starting to hate me now, not only for the midwife thing, but also for like predicting deaths and then them like coming true. Yeah. Yep. They did. But like I say, it's not that hard to look at a couple and tell. I mean, a young couple, yeah, it would be hard to tell something like that, but you can go off what you've seen or what other people say and, you know, all that fun stuff. And so anyway, she's in court. She goes to court. There's 3 guys there. The whole point of me telling you guys that there's no demons in this is because there's no church involved in this trial. Shockingly, there's no church. There's no preacher, no bishop, no reverend, none of that. And it's actually kind of nice. I ain't gonna lie. So, with her in court, there is no jury. This is not a jury. This is because of the political unrest, basically, and the fighting amongst the people that were originally here, the natives, and then the white. You know, they were all fighting. Okay, and so everything was under military law back then. In military law, they don't have a jury. They just decide your fate. And so she goes, you know, and of course the girl, you know, the people that accuse her, they have to go as well, and they have to say the things that she supposedly did and blah, 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 which is like bewitching chickens, supposedly making it so these guys can't shoot meat because they think that's what might have killed the baby, was the fact that the baby couldn't get any meat. But I'm sorry, at 4 months old, the baby's not eating meat. I would hope not. Not yet. It's a little young to be chewing on a drumstick. You feel me? Just saying. So she goes to court for threats on the colony's food and for the lives of the current and future colonists' security. basically saying that they're trying to make sure that none of this happens again, is what they're trying to do. But in actuality, it doesn't make any sense to me because all these problems that they said that she caused were obviously not caused by her. They were just problems that they had. This was a new settlement, a new land, new types of dirt. Like I say, new plants, new dirt. They don't know that you have to rotate your garden every 3 years. Even we know that down here in the South. You know, I have a family member that grows food, like vegetables and things like that in their garden. And every 3 years, they have to let the ground rest. And these might have been things that they didn't know. They were taught it, though, but they didn't use it. They were taught it by the natives, but they didn't use it. And so whenever something goes wrong during times like these, they always try to find somebody to put it on. And because of the stories that she told from when she was younger, growing up in England, everybody assumed that she was the one that was causing all this havoc, that she was doing her counter magic or whatnot on everybody, and that was the problem, right? She's the problem, everybody. Make that make sense, too. So it's unsure whether she was found guilty and then like given a punishment. They didn't even say if she. I know she didn't die. I know that they didn't kill her. They did make the family move though out of Elizabeth City, and they kind of pushed him to the outskirts because at this time people were like, oh, she's like the midwife that supposedly hurts babies or whatnot. Now her husband did speak on her behalf at her trial. He said, and I'll quote, "Been married to his wife of 16 years, and knoweth nothing by her," what? I can't read my own handwriting. And it's nothing by her, I cannot read my handwriting, the crime she's, by doing anything that the crime she's accused of. Basically saying she ain't do none of this. I would have seen it if she'd have done this, is what he says. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of cool that he took up for her. Eventually, like I say, they have to move away. They're kind of banished, you know, and nobody really, and their business kind of went downhill. You know, old dude was a clearer of woods. He was really good at his job, and that was something that they definitely needed, was to clear the woods out so they could build more of their colonies and things like that. And so the funny thing is, though, during the trial, one of her accusers asked her, if this is all made up, why aren't you suing us for slander? It's a legit question. It's a legit question. And so she said, God forgive them, is what Joan said. Even towards the end. That might have helped her a lot in her case. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It might have. It might have helped a whole lot. But with that one little phrase, that just goes to show you how strong she was in her faith. And that she firmly believed that she used her faith to be a good midwife and fortune teller. I think the fortune telling was something she would fall back on, but being a medical midwife was something she really loved to do. And she was really upset when a grown man couldn't come to her and say, hey, my wife, she's being spotty, you know, she's pregnant. She's just not right. She doesn't want you. She wants this other girl. And I'm sure that Joan would have said, okay, that's fine. But because they didn't even let her know, I would be mad too. I'm not gonna lie. I would be mad too, because what is that? You can't be man enough to go and tell somebody. First you're like, yeah, you got the job. So she's thinking she's got the job. And then the child is born, and she wasn't the midwife of that one. You know what I mean? And so she doesn't really understand. And I understand her frustration, you know. Maybe she felt bad about the whole gun situation, and she really wanted to try to help the wife, Maybe she was like, I feel bad that this guy can't shoot animals and he's trying to blame it on me. But, maybe stop drinking so much before you go out there with your guns and all that fun stuff. She did say she wasn't a witch, but there wasn't a recorded plea, unfortunately. So we don't know if she said, yes, I'm guilty, or nay, I'm not. But I'm pretty sure she lived on to live the rest of her life, although their business dwindled, their family had to move. And then once her husband actually got back into Elizabeth City, when the whoever the council there would allow him to come back, they gave him like 12 acres of really crappy, smart, like marshy land. Like literally, he can't do nothing with that. And so, unfortunately, that's where this ends, is them being pushed out. And evidently this probably followed them throughout their entire lives during the first years of America. Was that a gift that she brought from England of being a very, very spiritual midwife and a very skilled fortune teller ended up being her fate. And that makes me sad. It does. But that is the first American witch that was recorded in history before the Salem witch trials, okay? And this one was not based on demonic things or anything like that. No. This was more of, like I say, petty squabbles between neighbors. You got to think, at this time, America is becoming a melting pot of people. People from all walks of life are starting to come to America. And so everybody's telling stories from their countries, the things they did in their country and how they got there and all this other kind of stuff. And then people were just they were very open to her stories and liked her stories at first. And then now it's like, I think she's a witch, because she told us these stories. And now we're not getting any meat. We have famine. We have torrential downpours, which if you live on the coast, everybody knows it rains every day, because I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and it rains every day down there. It does. And these are just things that you can't blame a person for. Sickness, you can't blame them for that, especially when you arrive to a new land with a bunch of new diseases that nobody knows what they are yet. Everybody was just there trying to make it. And I feel so bad for Joan, because the rest of her life she went through probably being made fun of, not being able to be a midwife, which was like everything to her, all because of these people thinking that she was the one that has to do with the weather. She's scaring the animals. She's the one that hurt the baby because she left their house so angrily. She's the one that said these stories were true. The saddest part about this for me is the fact that they care what other people think. Let's talk about the word reputation really quick. Now, these people were still stuck in their ways from wherever they came from. England, wherever, Scotland, Ireland, wherever they came from. Because a lot of the Irish folks came too. They were trying to escape the famine. And so it's like everybody's coming over here and they want to do something good and they want to do something great with their life. But they're still stuck in this mindset that they can't do that because they're a woman, or because, it could be any reason that they can't do something. We need people to know that what other people think about you and what they say about you don't matter. First off, it's none of your business. And second off, how they feel is a reflection of themselves. And that's something I really want to put out there, because this is something that's been hitting me a lot lately, especially with having a family member pass. And, it's not about your reputation. It's about how you feel on the inside and who you are and how you act on the outside. You understand what I mean? And so instead of using her knowledge like she wanted to, she was shunned for it. and only because of some stories that she told from back in her home in England, unfortunately. And so that's our story for today about Joan Wright, the very first witch in America, recorded witch in America, 60 years before the Salem witch trials ever started. So, like I say, at the end of the day, don't care what people think about you. You just do you. Do you at the end of the day. Make sure you and yours are taken care of. All right? I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I will see y'all on Monday. All right? With a fresh story and some fresh makeup. So, I love you guys. Have a great weekend.